Let me mention a
Yep.
couple things too. So I know that a lot of people with mold, just looking at Dr. Shoemaker and his big list of symptoms, POTS is sort of thrown in to some of these symptoms for mold exposure, and then also Lyme. So when you're trying to find root causes, adrenals could be a factor, but there could be another layer deeper. So if you've had any kind of tick issues, co-infection issues, that could be a problem. And so I know Stephen Buhner, I talk about him a lot. He's a really great herbalist who's written a lot of books. He discusses using hawthorn. And so I've experimented with some heart formulas myself, like mixing CoQ10 and hawthorn, and I've had really good success with it. And so I think those are two good herbs that, two good nutrients that could help. And then also ginkgo could be helpful too, because ginkgo is going to help with blood flow and microcirculation. We use it a lot for brain problems, but I do believe that it can be helpful for POTS. And then let's talk about the adaptogenic herbs. So I guess it really depends on what you're looking like, but in general, adaptogens are going to help modify you either way. So I would say something like rhodiola or maybe a good ginseng like an eleuthero is going to be probably the top choice on adaptogens. What would you say? Oh, what about licorice? Should we talk about that?
Yeah, so a lot of these herbs out of the gates, they're nice because they're going to help with blood flow. A lot of these herbs like ginkgo or hawthorn, they tend to be used more on the high blood pressure side, right? And so they may help with blood flow, but remember, I think with POTS, there's definitely more of a low blood pressure kind of thing. So we have to kind of, make sure we support all of the other underlying issues, because, a lot of times if we're not getting to the root, then we may not get lasting results. Plus, a lot of times the medications that are used, what are the big medications that are used out of the gates? Is it just beta blockers out of the gates? I know they do some things like Florinef, which can be helpful, which is basically a pharmaceutical version of aldosterone, which helps to hold on to sodium, which helps increase blood pressure. You kind of alluded just a minute ago, licorice does help mimic that. And so we can use things like licorice that non-deglycerized, meaning not licorice that's deglycerized. Deglycerized licorice loses that aldosterone stimulating effect, and it's more for gut healing. But if we're using licorice that has not been deglycerized, non-DGL licorice, that can have very powerful effects on low aldosterone levels, and it can help hold on to minerals better. So if we're adding more minerals in there, that's helpful. Conventional medicine typically only talks about it from a perspective of sodium and sodium chloride. They kind of forget about the magnesium and the potassium part of it. So magnesium and potassium are also very important. Also, they're using a lot of beta blockers, right? So beta blockers, guess what? They reduce the heart rate, but they also can reduce the blood pressure, and they have effects of creating nutritional deficiencies. And you can lose some of those same minerals, magnesium, et cetera, that are also very helpful for the heart in general. So the problem with a lot of the medications, they can actually make some of the problems worse in the long run because they're not fixing the underlying issue.
Yeah, well said. Here's a couple other drugs. You're asking what drugs. Here's a list of them. There's one called ivabradine. It's a drug that acts on the heart to slow the heart rate, but it slows the heart without affecting blood pressure. And then there's another one here. It's hard to even pronounce it. Pyriostigmine, the brand name Mistanon.
Yep.
This is a drug that prevents the breakdown of acetylcholine. So that's pretty interesting. It's like an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, I guess.
Interesting.
So that's weird. It says they use it for, let's see here, myasthenia gravis, MG.
Yep. Now, that's an autoimmune condition that affects the postsynaptic neuron where acetylcholine plugs in.
So they're using that drug for POTS also. I guess it's kind of an off-label deal. And then SSRIs, for some reason, it says here that, people, I guess they're saying practitioners suspect that the fainting spells may be related to serotonin or some other neurotransmitter. So they also use SSRIs. But once again, none of this is root cause. And as you mentioned, the conventional like WebMD stuff is all about sodium. Like you should just be freaking eating spoonfuls of like iodized salt all day, which is just ridiculous.
And there's different kinds of salt, right? And there's some salts that we like that like real salt or Redmond's real salt or Celtic salt or Himalayan that are going to have sodium and chloride, but a bunch of other minerals as well, which is great. The problem, a lot of the medications, for instance, beta blockers are notorious for depleting CoQ10, and we need CoQ10 for healthy heart function. So problem with a lot of these medications is you're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? You're paying your credit card debt from last month with a new credit card you open this month. And so you can only play hot potato like that for so long before that bill becomes due.